Conversation on exploring aerial autonomy with Derek Lacey of Axios.
Okay. So I think the aerial domain is arguably the most dynamic and visible proving ground for drones and autonomy. And we're joined by Rob Rainhart, CEO of Auterion US, one of the most forward-leaning voices building that future. And I guess, I've been looking forward to this because of the sort of unique role that Auterion plays in the space. And so I'm wondering if you could first just sort of kind of explain what the company does for those who might not be familiar, your products, and you also recently got some big funding news as well.
Yeah. I'll start with the funding because that's the most exciting part as the COO, when you get to actually fund the full business and the vision there. We announced a $130 million investment led by Bessemer earlier this week, which is a significant capital infusion into the company and really sets the company up for growth really well and allows us to deliver on the vision there. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the company's rooted in kind of 3 to 4 different basic premises. The first is software, right? We're not really a drone manufacturer. We do have our own drones that we use for validating the software and the tech stack, but we're really about providing an open architecture software system that can be housed and operated on different drones across multiple OEMs to create a common architecture there. We just heard a question from the previous talk asking about how do we have drones have an open architecture. Auterion's OS is a way to do that, right? We have an SDK and API that allows you to integrate different capability into that drone. And it's gained a lot of traction when you see what's happening in Ukraine and around the world. And certainly when you start talking about swarms and large quantities of swarms, anytime you do that, you're probably going to do that across multiple vendors, right? So you've got to be able to do that in an open architecture way. So software is the enabler for everything we do. The second is cost. Doing that at scale that allows it to be at a price point and cost point, particularly on the short range and smaller strike capability, is really important. I mean, we're talking about drones that are thousands of dollars going up against really expensive military equipment. You got to do that at a price point that can be competitive, can be manufactured, and can be done there. Scale, we talked a little bit about that, but being able to enable a scale within the swarm across the system is really important. And the last is speed. I hope I just don't repeat everybody else's talking points. I feel like you hear a lot of the same themes. And by the way, one of the great things about coming to an event like this is you got to hear and you're like, oh, it's not just me, right? I'm not alone. Oh, I need to get out more, clearly. So speed, like the pace of innovation is so important to this. And we've heard a lot of talk about procurement, acquisition within the government. What we've learned, what Auterion has learned as a company from our experience in Ukraine, is the pace and speed is crazy, right? But that's a good thing because it helps you focus on the things that are really valuable to the user who needs the capability. So you don't get distracted by trying to anticipate everything that might happen because you're only focused on the things that are happening, right? And so development around that in the defense industry, when you're a commercial company, is rooted in that. And we have to change our procurement rules. We have to work closer. We have to take advantage of massive capital investment like this and like other companies, right, to the betterment of the United States and our purposes in the world. And we got to do it.
Okay, and speaking of lessons learned in Ukraine, from Auterion's sort of unique perspective, can you talk about your experiences there and some more pointed takeaways from getting those, objectives accomplished?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, until you experience it, until you're there and you work closely with the teams and the end users and you hear the direct feedback, you don't really know. So I think the experience there is changing dynamically. We heard earlier today talk about, an advancement on one side and then the other side turns around and advances. It's very much a game of tit for tat. And the systems that are doing well are those that are adaptable and can be modified and can be changed and can be accelerated there. I think autonomy plays a role in that. Autonomy in terms of flight operations, autonomy in terms of taking a task off the user, so the user's not in FPV goggles, right? Because if you have a user in FPV goggles, you've taken one person offline. And in war, that doesn't work very well, right? So one-to-one, one-to-autonomous system, one-to-many, and continuing to scale that up for that. So understanding the dynamics, earlier today, we heard about, there's so many sensors on the battlefield. It makes it very, very hard to move. It makes it very, very hard to operate. And so, highly proliferated sensors all over the place, dynamic systems that are kind of hiding and can be tasked remotely. It's just a very dynamic, changing environment. And I'm thankful that the rest of the world is finally waking up to this, seeing it and recognizing that conventional approaches will not work, right? It's unfortunate that we had to put ourselves in a conflict like this, but the rest of the world is recognizing, and we're seeing the shift in strategy there in terms of the investment in autonomous systems and the value they have along the front line. I mean, they really are force multiplying efforts there. And you don't learn that if you're not there to see that firsthand and understand and hear the feedback of what's actually happening.
Right, and something else we've heard about today is this, sort of catching up with China when it comes to hardware manufacturing.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's also this sentiment that, Western or U.S. software might be better. Does that sentiment still hold? And I guess, are fewer smarter drones better than more dumber ones?
It's a good question. Like, I definitely think software is where it's at. That said, you still got to run that software on something. Nobody's figured out how to run software in air yet. So you still got to put it on a processor and do something with it. You still have to go off and deploy it there. I think there's a balance there. I think it's a question of, like, what's the right massive scale that really starts to create a level of deterrence that changes the game, right? Taking lessons from the Cold War and pulling that forward into the drone war, right? What would change the dynamics is massive scale that's really hard to comprehend overcoming. Okay. And so there's a certain amount of this that still resides on scale and production and manufacturing there. We talked a lot about the threats earlier today, the jamming. It's very dynamic. So one area, one high-powered jammer may not affect drones in another area. So there's a lot of options for use in and around those. I think we heard it in the last one. I think the right choice, and I think we just heard it in the last chat there, which was really important, which is, like, the fastest way is to start buying at scale, right? You're not going to get the innovation you need buying 1,000 drones a year. You're just not going to get that. And I've talked to a lot of leaders in the defense department and War Department. Excuse me, I'm reprogramming my brain. I'm slower than the rest. And around the world in terms of different departments there. And they're like, yeah, in peacetime, I need 1,000 drones a year, and in wartime, I might use 1,000 drones a day. You're not going to be able to get to 1,000 drones a day if you're not buying them, and you can't wait to start that. So you've got to start that process now. You got to start using those drones. The good news is they're at a price point. We talked about the aircraft carrier and the cost of an aircraft carrier earlier. You can buy a lot of drones for one aircraft carrier, right? So they're at a price point that you can get going a lot sooner and infuse that. So to me, the supply chain piece and the combating the supply chain piece of China is investment across a number of providers there. We just participated in Project GI with DIU, and it was publicly announced that we were one of 4 providers that achieved mission success, and they're pulling forward there. And we're very proud of that as a company, and there's a lot of opportunity. That's a great example of something that should continue to propagate and be brought forward and pushed from a procurement perspective.
Okay, interesting. And another thing I wanted to touch on too is Auterion also has a presence, you sort of straddle the pond, so to speak, of a presence in Europe. How can you leverage that sort of partnership, to help overcome some of those challenges?
Yeah, so we have a global company. We support customers all over the world. We have a team in the US, we have a team in Munich, we have a team in Zurich. And so I leverage that team by looking for best in breed from a research and development and capability perspective, pull that into the different markets, and then work with our own in-country teams to deploy that very quickly, or work very closely with an OEM or another partner, another drone partner or an autonomous system partner, to be able to go deploy that very quickly and rapidly on there. So our global workforce gives us an advantage of understanding what's going on in different markets, right? And there certainly is a lot going on between the US and Europe in terms of investment in these autonomous systems, just in the last 8 months or longer. And the growth there's been expansive. And so by having that global footprint, I'm able to take advantage of all that feedback and that input there. The company was founded by a founding member of PX4, Lorenz Meyer, the CEO of the corporate entity and founder of the company, wrote PX4, invented Mavlink. So the company is very well rooted in open source and open architectures there to support, and we still heavily support that aspect and those open source components within the company. And that gets done out of some of those global instances, and that folds back into the other defense units, which are in the US and Germany. Okay,
interesting. Another thing I want to talk about is this idea that maybe autonomy in drones is sort of easier in the aerial domain. I know Auterion works across domains, and so I'm curious if you could share what you can learn from or give to the other domains and kind of what that Venn diagram across domains looks like.
So I don't know about easier, but different, right? Different controls, different inputs. I mean, our software and hardware has been put on quadcopters, fixed wing, VTOL, large loitering, long-range munitions. We're partnered with Kraken in the UK. Our autonomy solution and autonomy stack's been put on boats and rovers and a whole bunch of different systems. I think the scale on water and the scale on land is a little different than the scale in the air. So I think the reason you see more interest or more momentum in the air domain is just the number of vehicles that would be used in that domain over the long haul there.
Okay, and I'm interested too, Auterion connects drones of different manufacturers, but in the field you still have to have those sort of overriding comms. And how do you keep that resilient where they might be contested or denied?
Yeah, so we've implemented and work with almost every radio you can think of that's been put on a drone. And we have our own comms layer that we're incorporating in some cases as well. I think starting my career as a protected comms guy, it's all about having options and the flexibility to work around and in and around things. There's no end-all be-all. With these sophisticated jammers, at some point, some portion of your system is going to be hit. I think you've got to have a level of autonomy. I mean, we heard that earlier. You've got to be able to operate without the need for a command and control link. You've got to be able to navigate and move around without the need of GPS or other comm signals, right? And you've got to be able to deliver on the use case. And so I think there's, sometimes with jammings, there's always a conversation of absolutes, like you're either jammed or you're not. And the answer is it's a lot more variable than that. So there's definitely standoff distances and a lot you can do where you can be outside a jamming bubble, make a decision, go full autonomous, and do your job, right? And so those are the scenarios that we look at. So it's not quite as absolute, But you have to have the autonomy and the system in place to be able to handle those and the smarts on board to be able to make some decisions, right? And in the case of a battlefield, return to base is not the option, right? That's not what you do when you lose comms or navigation.
Okay, and I'm interested too, sort of where you see, when you're talking about swarms of drones, autonomous drones, where you see the sort of machine to operator ratio. Are we moving toward, nothing but machines, or one operator with a large amount? Just kind of what does that ratio look like in the future?
Yeah, we're doing, and we produced a video last week that was a real video of testing we're doing. We're doing 1 to 5, 1 to 10, so operator 10 drones. That operates like a small pack that goes off to perform a mission, and can do that. So that's the art of the possible of where we're at today in terms of one to many. In the battlefield, I think it's still very much 1 to 1, 1 to few. I think you'll see that continue to scale up, but there is absolutely a limit in terms of comms links and challenges there once you get above a certain number. That you've got to be able to deal with. I think you're going to see you're going to see regional swarms. You're going to see swarms operating together in certain areas. You're going to send a swarm to a bounding box, look for a particular target, things like that. And I think there's still going to be, there's still a lot of human interaction, right? I think at this point we're still in the world where, there's an independent user who's still on the loop, looking at what's happening and deciding, yeah, that's the right thing to go after, and there. And I think we'll continue to see that until there's a level of trust in those operations and those systems. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, interesting. And there was some discussion earlier too about changes in acquisitions at the federal level. And I'm just curious kind of what a company like Auterion would like to see from Congress, or like to see those change, what type of direction you'd like to see those changes go in.
Yeah, I think, I've spent my whole career working for commercial companies developing products that are grounded in support for defense and intel. And what I mean by that, grounded in, what I mean by that is like greater than 50% of the business at the company is invested, is in systems that are sold to defense and intel. And I think there is a level of interaction that the government needs to put forward in terms of working with these systems, particularly as they become more commoditized and more commercially available. And in the drone industry, we're converging there, certainly driven by the demand that we're all seeing in Ukraine based upon world events. So what I would love to see is the opportunity to engage and work with the end users. We're seeing some of that now. We heard that from the CTO of the Army, where they are doing very rapid work, selections, down selects. We've seen that at a few places with DIU, but we got to keep pushing it, and we got to keep pushing it forward. So those systems need to go very quickly into exercises and demonstrations to validate. And I think we've got to get a lot faster and a lot more frequent demonstrations, right? This isn't once a month, once a quarter. This is every week there's an opportunity to go out and do some level of verification and validation of those. And if the government is fostering that, right, then they're going to get more industry playing in, and they're going to get best of breed, right? The best scenario for me as a purchaser when I'm buying something is to have multiple people fighting over my attention based upon price capability. So the government needs to have multiple vendors out there all fighting for that, all fighting for the pieces there. And the best innovation is when we get it in the hands of the users. You don't learn anything great when you put this through a bureaucratic system, because it's just not fast enough. So the best innovation is when you put it to the users and you're able to experiment and hear that. We've gotten some great feedback in some of the work we've done with the Marines, and some of it hurt, right? Some of the feedback hurt. We're like, yeah, we're not ready for this. So we had to take that back in and work on that and do that. So I think the government's got to figure out how they're going to interact and work with those people, work with those situations more efficiently, effectively.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned the open source format. I'm wondering, given that, how do you sort of keep supply chains resilient, as fast as things change?
I mean, it's a constant day-to-day, week-to-week, quarter-to-quarter battle. For me, it's about having multiple manufacturing partners located in different locations in the US, in Europe, around the world. So there's always some options. It's about having multiple paths to manufacture and supply those things. I think for us, you know, if you go to our website and you look up what a SkyNode, and SkyNode S is the small little processor module that we put on most of the FPV drones, and that's what we're delivering into Ukraine along with the software at scale. If you look at that from a manufacturing perspective, it's a small little 2-inch by 2-inch board. It's not big, right? So we're not talking about something that is a large manufacturing lift here that has thousands of ICs and thousands of components and stuff like that. I'm not trying to minimize it because it is a challenge, but it's manageable with the right disaggregated approach to manufacturing there. But we also need demand, right? No company is going to go scale up to 1,000 drones or 10,000 drones a month without the demand. So you got to play a little bit of the game here and build some momentum in terms of the demand there. We certainly see the demand within Ukraine. I think we'll probably deliver north of 50,000 strike kits into Ukraine over the next 3 or 4 months. That certainly looks to grow, but we need to see it happen in other areas as well.
Okay, well, that's a little bit about what I was going to ask, is sort of about demand signal and differences in manufacturing, you know, the types of things Auterion manufactures versus a sort of traditional drone manufacturer. You know, what are those differences? How can you capitalize on those? And what are the challenges that are sort of unique to you?
So our solution, what we're delivering into Ukraine, is a completely commercial platform and product that goes in there. So the manufacturing we use for a SkyNode that's used on a fixed wing or a quad in Ukraine is the same one that we use, same base hardware that's used in some of our other enterprise applications. There's no difference between those. You know, we stress a fully NDAA compliant solution. We're doing all the manufacturing in the U.S. or allied partners around the world. And so we approach those two things from both ways.
Okay, interesting. And I'm curious too, just we talked about the funding earlier and some things you've got, you know, deliverables ready to go to Ukraine, that kind of stuff. I'm just curious, when you leave here, what are you most excited to sink your teeth into? What's sort of on the bleeding edge for Auterion?
Let's see. I mean, it's the company's going to, with this capital infusion, the company's going to scale up in a number of ways. We're going to put more of that funding back into the R&D and product investment. We're going to scale up the go-to-market function in other different areas of the world to be able to expand our market presence and in-country presence. I think it's really important, if you're going to get that user feedback, you have to be there with those users, right? You can't get it second, third hand. It just doesn't work, and it's not fast enough. For me, you know, the thing that we're really, really rooted in delivering on is swarms at scale. So it's really about the fundamental pieces that are needed in the technology to continue to scale that up. And we're there. I mean, we're demonstrating this in quantities of 5 and more, and we're going to invest in that heavily to go out there and support customers. Because I think that's what brings the deterrence level, you know, in terms of overwhelming a scenario. And that's what brings the deterrence level that the leaders want to be able to see in that situation.
Okay, interesting. And swarms at scale, I think, you know, looking at Taiwan and some of the deterrence efforts there, what Auterion does, what do you see as those big hurdles to reach that? I mean, you say the technology is ready.
I think all of it is, I think a lot of it's comms, right? I think if you're talking about swarms of thousands and 10,000s, you got to have a comms solution that's far beyond any of the commercial comms solutions that are out there. So I think that's there. I mean, I think you got to have a forward deployed team. You got to have a manufacturing and supply chain in locations to be able to handle that. We certainly heard about earlier, I can't remember who it was, but we talked about manufacturing with allies, and we're certainly seeing that happening there. So I think there's those aspects. For us as a software company, we really focus on getting that deployed across a number of different manufacturers and a number of different OEMs, so that if you're a user, you can buy a drone from here and a drone from there and a drone from there, and you could create a cross swarm across those drones and be able to have that operate. To do that, you've got to have a number of users using that operating system. Certainly that's happened for us in Taiwan. We did a public announcement with the lab there, where they're leaning heavily on Auterion as an OS solution across a number of their drone platforms, and working with a couple in-country partners right now on integration across a couple different platforms there. So I think you gotta play all those pieces.
Okay, and what are, that sounds like a lot of coordination. You're talking about different countries, different supply chains, different products. What's it like to juggle that, and what are the challenges, in making all that happen?
Yeah, I'm like the other gentleman earlier. United Airlines likes me, and Star Alliance. I mean, look, you got to. In some cases, in some markets, it's about hiring your own team and growing the team in country. In other places, in other markets, it's about having the right partner and working through an in-country partner. Every country is a little different. I've done business around the world in a lot of different countries. And you got to get there. You got to find the right partner, or you got to find the right team to get it growing. And you got to work that pretty hard. And you got to be there early. I think sometimes there's a tendency to not put some forward deployed capability or forward deployed people in country. I think you got to be there early, earlier than your gut tells you need to. But building that in country presence is so important to getting user feedback, understanding what the needs are, and getting capability in the hands of the user that they can really grow on.
Okay, great. Well, that's everything I've got for you, Rob. I appreciate the super interesting
Derek, it was
conversation.
awesome, and I appreciate the opportunity to chat with folks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Now